Well, it is really true, everyone. What the world does need now is love, sweet love. And, one of the things that I really enjoy doing is trying to convince all of you of the importance in life, that it really does boil down to love and having great relationships. And as I oftentimes say, the bigger, the better, the more, the yachts, the planes, the stock accounts, all of those things, they're nice, but they only really do it for the day. And as a psychotherapist, a sex therapist, and an author and expert guest in national and local radio and television, I've had an opportunity over the years, beginning with my really postgraduate training experience in the inner city areas of Montreal, to work with people who really had to worry about how they were going to put food on the table for their children, and whether or not they were going to have sufficient monies for their rent and for just basic essentials that so many of us just really take for granted. And in the last probably 25, 35 years, to a very large degree, my private practice here in New York City, in East Hampton, and of course, I had a private practice in Providence, Rhode Island, and also in Sarasota, Florida. I had an opportunity, probably because of my connections with the media, to treat a lot of really, really wealthy and famous people, household names for many of us. And might one really believe that the rich and the famous, that their lives were easier? Well, they were easier materially. But as I've often said, is that the same issues, the relationship knowledge, the relationship skills, the ups and downs, the fact is that no one is immune, whether or not you're rich or poor or black or white or Jewish or Muslim or Christian or gay or straight or trans, from the ups and downs, the reality of the ups and downs of life. And I think that it is really incumbent upon all of us, given that reality, to figure out, what are we going to do? How are we going to go about living our life in ways that are really in our best interest? And in the past 12 years that I have been hosting the Ask Beatty show here on the Progressive Radio Network, I haven't wanted to tell you how you should live your life, but I'm hoping that in some small way, I have been able to educate and empower, and in certain circumstances, to try and keep you safe and keep you on a track where you, in fact, are living your life in ways that are really good for you. And I want to give you an example. This morning, I woke up to a number of patient crises, and it was about 2 o'clock this afternoon, and it's 3 o'clock here in beautiful, sunny New York City right now. And I was thinking, should I do the show? Because I had all these crises and people were calling, and I was talking with doctors and patients. And then I paused and I asked myself the consequences for me personally of not doing the show, a show that I absolutely, absolutely love hosting. That was not going to be a good decision. That was not going to be something today that was really in my best interest. And so I was able to take a deep breath and tell myself, okay, I may not be as prepared today as I normally am, but yes, it was absolutely the right decision to do, because I knew if I didn't do the show today, that I was going to feel as if I had missed something. I was going to maybe beat myself up in some fashion. And this is an example of where we all need to be very honest with ourselves continually, in asking ourselves the question throughout the day, throughout the weeks, throughout the months, whether or not decisions that we are making are indeed decisions that are in our best interest. I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I saw a patient, and yes, I do see people on Sundays and on the weekend on occasion. And this is a woman, she's 70 years old. She's got a great job as an executive. She's never been married, which has been something that has been incredibly painful for her. She had hoped to have a family and hoped to have children. But in any case, she has a lot of other things really going for her in her life. However, she physically has not been taking care of herself, and she's put on a lot of weight, which really upsets her. And we've been talking about this for the last couple of weeks, the importance of doing things that sometimes we don't feel like doing, like taking a walk, eating well, making sure that we're getting sufficient sleep. And in her particular case, we talked about this, about joining a gym. So we've had these long conversations about what is in your best interest in terms of feeling better physically. So cognitively and objectively, she says, yes, I need to definitely start to exercise several times a week. I need to cut down on the amount of alcohol and wine that I'm drinking. So from a purely rational perspective, this woman, with my assistance over the years actually that I've been treating her, she knows exactly what she needs to do that is in fact in her best interest. But what do you think? But what do you think she did? Well, she was supposed to text me yesterday and let me know that she was going to go to a gym. She was going to inquire about membership. She was going to get a tour of the facility. And yet the excuses continue to be made. And this is something that I think that many people fall into. We know, we know what is good for us. We know, on the other hand, what is not working for us and our lives. And yet I feel it is the determination that we need to somehow find a way to better instill in ourselves, that whether or not, like me today, whether or not I felt like doing the show or I didn't feel like doing the show, I knew rationally, I knew cognitively that that was in fact in my best interest. And this is where sometimes we have to put our feelings aside, especially feelings that take us off a constructive and positive path. And I'm sure that many of you can actually, really relate to this. I think that there is so much information, certainly in the medical field, in the healthcare field, although I know it can be very confusing at times, about what's good for us. What food should we be eating? What things should we be doing that will really enhance our physical and emotional and our psychological and our psychiatric well-being. And yet, I think that there are far too many excuses that people tend to make. And we find ourselves just going off track and then wondering why we're not feeling better about ourselves, about our lives, and about our relationships. And this is one of the things about athletes, about professional athletes. There is a regime, there is a routine. Of course, there are coaches and there are teams, people that help to support professional athletes in terms of really staying on course. And I've always felt that we don't need large teams. I mean, really, one person will do, somebody that will help really just reinforce the things that you need to do, that you need to do, are in fact things that are going to make you feel better in all kinds of ways. And I think we can get lazy and we can get distracted. And yet, if we're going to stay the course, and if we're really going to be living our life in ways that are good for us, there's a certain protocol that we need to be willing to embrace, whether or not we feel like it or whether or not we don't. And I'm sure that many of you who are listening to the show right now, you could really relate to this. We can get lazy, and the laziness and the lack of focus in doing the things that will really catapult us into a better place in our life, we cannot afford too often to let these things really go by the wayside. Well, last week, I spent a lot of time talking about what was going to be happening in the election. Well, the election has now come and gone. And for better, for worse, we have a new president. And what was so interesting for me is that despite the fact that so many former Donald Trump administration officials, including his generals and ambassadors and national security people, they all described him as a narcissistic, petulant child, a liar, a fascist. His lack of basic knowledge of a complex, dangerous world represents a danger to our own democracy. Members of his cabinet, they questioned his loyalty to the country, his dictatorial, authoritarian statements, and his chaotic, volatile behavior. His press aides talked about his lack of integrity, his bullying tendencies to attack others in brutish, dehumanizing ways. And his own vice president, if you recall, Mike Pence, has accused him of being reckless and putting himself above the Constitution, and has refused to endorse him in the election. But apparently, despite all of this, despite the fact that major psychiatrists in this country have diagnosed him serious with narcissistic personality disorder, many people believe that he is not only a psychopath, but a sociopath. Apparently, none of this really mattered, because in the final analysis, I mean, he swept away the election. And for me, the issue was not so much Donald Trump and Donald Trump winning the presidency, but for me, it really is a commentary on America and on Americans. Well, today I have someone who is much more savvy about all of this than I am, my husband, Jim Fredos, who is a sociologist and a criminologist, and who is the host of an amazing television show on MNN, The Radical Imagination, and also hosts a show in East Hampton with Barbara Layton called Real Talk. So to get some real expert perspective on all of this, I asked Jim to come in and really provide us with some commentary that we may not be hearing on other radio shows and television shows. So, Jim, welcome.
Hey,
Thank
hi.
you for coming in.
Well, thank you for inviting me as always. I will certainly communicate whatever I can. I don't know what sort of expertise it will be, but it will be a commentary, certainly
Good.
from my own reading and my own experience of viewing American elections for decades.
So what do you make of this? I mean, he swept away basically the entire country.
Well,
The
that's
Senate,
a
the
little
House.
overstating it. I mean, the
Do you think it's
country,
overstating it?
yeah, the country is still very polarized, and there's certainly close to half who disagree vehemently with his his positions and see him as you've described him by various authorities and psychiatrists and so on and associates and so on. Where to start? Where to start? You said, you raised the issue as for you, at least, that this is a commentary on the American people.
Well, they voted him in.
Oh, okay.
Right.
We they did, and we voted in a lot of other bad presidents or presidents. Look, this is all relative in a sense. People defined what is a good president, a bad president, often it's dependent on their own social positions. Um, they have certain rankings that political scientists and historians have, and they go about calling this or that president better than others. I guess Roosevelt and Lincoln, Washington would be classified as great presidents. Nixon, Bush would not be, and so on. So, this is a politics is a blood sport, and Trump is very good at it.
He's a master.
Well, he's a master, but
Yeah.
anybody that gets to that position has learned to maneuver, to use power in various ways. I mean, your description, he may be an extreme example of some of the personal characteristics you were talking about. But certainly people that get to that level uh, often exhibit what you're talking about. I don't know. I.F. Stone, the great radical journalist, often pointed out that all governments lie. All, he made that very clear. Some more than others, but they all do. So whether it's a commentary on the people, if you're going to go that route,
But of course, it's a commentary on the people.
but
The people voted him in. You know what this reminds me of, Jim? You know what I see in families or with couples where people will say, "Well, he did this or she did that, or he is this or she is that." The fact is that people enable and encourage and go along with some really disgusting and toxic behavior, and then blame the other person.
well, I think people aren't so much concerned with personal attributes. So that does play a part, absolutely, but their personalities and so on. But the bottom line is what they perceive it's their policies are going to do for them. And that's where I would agree more with Bernie Sanders on this, is that the Democrats have failed their base, have gone away from their roots, their foundation, among unions and working class and middle class and so on, and the poor. The poor are hardly even mentioned at all by the Democrats. So I think I would start with making a commentary about where the Democratic Party is. There's enough blame to go around, so I want to make that clear that we need to move forward and not just resist out of some sort of defensiveness, because this is our country too. Whether you agree or not with Trump, we cannot be bullied and should not be bullied in democracy, and we need to resist, but not in a defensive way. We need to have positive alternatives and programs, and that people and visions that people in the country can absolutely see. And I think the better side, the better angels of our country would come out.
Well, what was so interesting to me is that, we know a number of people from Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, and I mean, how they were insulted by Trump and what happened here in New York City at Madison Square Gardens with one of his, his I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure how to describe the comedian, but yes, and yet people didn't seem to really mind.
Well, I don't know if
Very
it's, again,
much.
minding. He did gain in the Latino community.
He gained everywhere.
Well, even the
Everywhere.
Upper West Side here.
That's right, he did.
And so on.
He did.
Now, one could get into very esoteric discussions about, which we're not going to go into, Marx, false consciousness, and people voting against their interests. I think that's all true, by the way. But again, it amounts to, because you're a very positive, energetic person, about offering positive alternatives. And that's what we need to do now for those who want to see more progressive, positive change in the country.
What does that even what does that even mean? We have a House, we have a Senate that's red.
Well, I think it
We
means,
have people like Elon Musk, we have people
well, I
like
think,
Kennedy, we
well,
have
so we have
Trump.
people like that. We've always had people like that. They've always ran the country. They've always dominated the powers. They were the powers that be.
So what to
The
do?
business of America has always been
So
business. So what to do?
what
Well,
to
again,
do? What to do?
from my position or perspective and my own life's activism and academic interests and so on, uh, it's not rocket science. It's about listening to people. It's about movements. It's about organizing and going door to door and organizing at a local level, and then getting together organizations that can build a more broad-based movement, a true anti-war movement, for example, or a true movement that really speaks to the needs of the poor and the working class, and to those sorts of actions and so on. So, they've had their say. They've been. This is not anything new. This attempt to of the rich and the super rich to gain more and more and more power has been going on for since the inception of the country, for that matter, but particularly since Roosevelt, and when there was a really much stronger socialist and even communist movement in this country, that really took to the streets and pushed these plutocrats to the wall. And Roosevelt, who was a member of that class, said to his fellow plutocrats, listen, they're not playing around anymore. They're coming to get us. And we need to come up with programs and plans to really meet the needs of the huge and great numbers of people who are suffering. And he did. And of course, historically, he's said to save capitalism and so on. But there was a sizable number of these rich and super rich who never bought into Roosevelt, who were against the New Deal and who fought it extensively. And they did their homework. They don't make a mistake about it. They organized. I mean, since Roosevelt, during the 60s, the John Birch Society, Coors, all these people began to uh, push back against the programs. There was a course during the 60s. There was perhaps the apex of uh, progressive movements that coalesced around the civil rights movement. And then it disappeared. And not, I should say disappeared, but it was fought back. And certainly the assassinations of Bobby Kennedy, that's senior. Bobby Kennedy Sr., the father, is much, much different than his own son. So make no mistake about that. There's no comparison. But certainly the killing of assassination of Martin Luther King and Bobby and Malcolm and so on. John Kennedy, of course, was you know part of the societal reaction by the rich and the super rich. I'm not saying that they were the ones that assassinated them, but they did their homework. They organized. They lashed back at the Great Society programs and started cutting them back. And certainly with Reagan and Bush and so on, continued and as well as the neoliberals. And at the end there, Trump saw this and he saw an opening, an opportunity. And Harris was put in a very uncomfortable position. Too late, too little. She tried to resurrect her own record or sort of throw this or that program and promises and so on. But she still represented an elite group, and people weren't stupid. They weren't stupid. They had been lied to before, and so on. So I would, again, Beatty, I would say, and then I'll shut up on this for a minute. I would start with the issue of this is a commentary on our political parties and and the way that the country has been manipulated.
And
The people.
I also think that this is a commentary on our inability to really make good assessments in terms of the kinds of leaders, terms of the kinds of
Well,
partners, the kinds of people that we want in our life.
But we don't have good assessments, partly because we have a corporate media that doesn't offer us the opportunity to hear these points of view. So again, it becomes the focus for me is more there on that. Why don't we have serious talks? Why don't we have a media that is not, busy giving us a bunch of garbage?
I think that people in the last number of years have heard enough from Donald Trump. We've seen his behavior. We've seen different convictions, of course, that are going to be all
Well,
thrown
they've
out.
heard enough about him.
They've
The
heard
media's
enough.
plate has given him much more time than he ever deserved. And in part, they made, and as well as in The Apprentice, they made him. If he wasn't on that show, he'd never have gotten this far. So the media had a big part in creating this fellow.
Well,
It is grand.
one of the things, of course, that I say, all the time is how careful we really need to be who we let into our lives, whether we're talking politically or professionally, or personally. And, I think about, the way he has spoken about women, his treatment of women. I look at his wife. Of course, now I'm putting on my psychotherapy hat. And, one wonders. I mean,
Well,
she's living the life. She's living a life with somebody who has embarrassed her, who's a philanderer, who's
but so
sexually
was John Kennedy. So
well.
was Bill
But
Clinton.
then I have to
And they,
also then wonder, I wonder, and not, no judgment necessarily, or no criticism necessarily,
why not? Why not?
about women putting up with this
Okay.
kind of behavior from people, from their partners who are supposed to
Good
care and
point.
are
Yeah.
supposed to love. So this is the enabling part that we absolutely cannot not talk about.
But they like the privilege and power that they're in,
Well,
that they have.
then you pay the consequences.
Well, that's right.
You
That's
really
right.
pay
Well,
the
Hillary put up with this sort of stuff. So because she was priming herself to become president and
And
so
that's
on.
what we do. We teach little girls that it is okay. It is okay to put up with abuse. It is okay to put up with disrespect as long as you may live in a glass house in Palm Beach on
I
a
agree with you.
on A1A
I agree with you.
on the Atlantic. And this is why, Jim, we're not seeing any positive change when it comes to how people are living their lives personally.
What do you mean?
I mean,
We're not seeing.
that's just look at the statistics that I cite every single week about the divorce rate. 48% of first marriages end in divorce, 67% of second marriages end in divorce, 72% of third marriages end in divorce. Three women are still killed every single day by their so-called intimate partner. So we're going around in circles, and I think that we're fooling ourselves about what is really important. I mean, I think that a Melania Trump, one would hope, yes, she has come out in support of abortion. Well, that must have been a really interesting conversation that she would have
What has
had with
been
her
her
husband.
official position on
That's
it?
what she
That
said. She's
she's
she's pro
pro
she's pro-choice.
pro-choice.
She's pro-abortion.
Well, Trump was pro-choice prior to, a few years ago. These are people that, switch on a dime if they see it's in their interest.
Yeah.
And who knows, again, he may have given her the okay to say this and so on,
Well,
to gain whatever, because he began to moderate his own position on abortion, because he felt that this would get him more votes among women and so on. So these politicians as I said before, a blood sport and
well, you can talk about the politicians,
right.
when we were watching, the election results, and you could see all the red states and the Senate and the House. I still say that this is a commentary on Americans
I
and about what Americans really tend to value.
I have to really push back hard on that. And
Okay.
I really mean this. I think that people make mistakes. People are not as well educated about certain things. But to paint a brush, we're getting close to Hillary's comments too about these people. They're just hopeless sort of.
But how can we not paint
Well,
a
no, but
brush?
the
How can we
point is
not paint a
because
brush?
these are I still love this country very, very much, and I love the people here. I think what we need to do is, especially on the left and progressives and Democrats, is to trust these people, to trust the American
How
people.
do we trust the American
Yeah,
people
we don't.
to have voted
No,
in
because it's not their.
somebody like
They've
this?
got to go to these people and really listen to them. Why are they angry? Why? And they have a right to be. In a sense, not they don't have necessarily. Trump is not the answer, but when they're paying $5 in for gas and can't afford the rent and so on, that's the fault. That's not their fault. That's the fault of the politicians, especially the neoliberals and the Democrats who are wishy-washy. I'll use what's Cornell's term, a term there.
I'm not
Come to
sure.
me in a minute. That they're very weak and enfeebled and so on. They just are cowards. They just don't go further. They stop halfway and they even get that far. Oh, we'll give a few crumbs here. We'll get this and that. People aren't stupid. What we need is a full throat, full blown resurrection of FDR's economic Bill of Rights. It's not rocket
So
science. If you had that, and I firmly, as you know, I firmly believe Cornel West was the best candidate to articulate
he
that.
got
Yeah, well,
50,000 votes. He got
he didn't have the meeting.
50,000
But
votes
the
in this
point I'm getting
country.
at, his argument it goes back to the fundamentals and the truth and integrity of the movement that could make a difference. And if his voice, not just Cornell, but if there's a
True,
voice
true.
was really out there, then you'd have a much different administration. So I would put it not on the people.
Well, I mean, clearly,
Certainly there are, I'm not saying
look,
that there aren't racists, there aren't misogynists and so on, very troubled individual. I'm not saying that. And Trump himself is certainly a very troubled individual. I'm not denying.
and there's so much misinformation
Yes,
and there's so
absolutely.
much distortion and there's so much confusion. I mean, on social media,
Absolutely.
about all kinds of things, about all kinds of things, and people are confused.
That's that.
I mean, that is another big problem. And yet I have to say, I wasn't surprised because I predicted that this was going to happen. But what did surprise me was how sweeping
Mm,
the actual
how
final
extensive
and extensive
his
the actual
victory actually was.
yes, yes,
Well, again,
yes.
uh, boy, the electoral college is outdated. There's so many. Money is so much a part of this whole business. The donor classes. I mean, there's so much that we don't really see that's behind the scenes here. But I'm agreeing with what you're saying.
It was certainly, for us, it was very disappointing. And I guess we're going to have to see really, Jim, how this is going to play out in real
Well,
time.
it's a matter, yes, but it's a matter of those of us who, we just can't sit back, as many of the, I'm not necessarily talking about you, but academic elites or who are just sitting back and again, sort of twiddling their thumbs and waiting to see what happens. You got to get out there. You got to speak to people. You got to articulate. You got to teach the young people, young students, how to critically think about what's going on. We're not doing that. And again, the academics, you can throw a lot of blame on the academics too, are not doing their job. They are also seeing themselves as functionaries. They're into a career, not a vocation. This is a way of getting up the ladder on the academic
Well,
know,
this is really this is a commentary on caring, and this is a commentary on character. This is also a commentary on love, and
yes,
and how do we really go about to create a
it's
more loving society where there is, more equality across the board, where our values are more in line
yeah,
with hopefully our desires for connection,
yeah, I agree.
versus this win-lose type of philosophy.
Well, again, as a sociologist, we need programs, we need policies that truly um, enhance people's ability to take care of themselves and to move up the ladder and to have a decent education and decent housing and so on. Again, it's not rocket science. The resources are there. It's how it gets distributed. It's how it gets used. And there's enough blame to go around here. It's not all Trump. Trump is very good at manipulating people, but the Democrats too manipulated, and they got caught with their pants down because their manipulations didn't hold up. There was too little, and not very much.
Well, I guess we're gonna have to wait and see,
Well,
what's gonna really be happening, how many people are gonna be deported, whether or not
that's a
anything
great point.
is really going to change.
That's a great point. You're right. We have to sort of take a breath here and see what happens. People are all writing, there's no guardrails, there's no way. We have to see, and that's where your field comes in very, very much. We're dealing with an individual who's very manipulative and who has a very chaotic personality, and people just don't know what the hell he's gonna do.
Well, I think what's going to happen is that he has already surrounded himself with like-minded people. And
And he can be appeased, and you never know. Even you were mentioned his vice president, who who's they were going to kill him, but he has now come out and congratulated him for his winning.
right,
Right,
because he may want something,
that's right.
and like many people are wanting now to have him ingratiate to them,
Absolutely,
and maybe they can get
absolutely.
a job, and maybe they can
Yeah,
be a part of his
very
administration.
interesting.
But I think that what's going to happen is that he has, and he already has started to just, select people very much like himself, so that there isn't going to be much controversy. And now that, he's won the House and he's won the Senate, I mean, to me, it seems as if we Americans, not me, but we
You're-
Americans have given him really carte blanche to pretty much do what he
Well,
wants to do. I mean,
well,
that's just a fact.
well, look, we had that. Lyndon Johnson had carte blanche, and Democrats had the Senate, the Congress at that time, and they did push through many bills, and Roosevelt tried to do that as well. So let's let's see what happens, and let's see some of the results, and uh, let's see where he does bring about some positive uh, programs, and where he fails, then we're going to see that we are going to have to look for alternative visions. And I think that's where the left and the progressives,
Well,
what do you
four
want to call them,
years.
have to be ready.
Well, 4 years is a long time, and I haven't looked at the latest statistics, but I have a sense that 50% of American women also voted for him. And that is a real sad commentary
Well,
on where women are at, given his disgusting behavior,
yeah, but
given his position on all kinds of issues, including reproductive issues that affect us as women. And here you have it. Was the number close to 50%?
look, I hear what you're saying, and we come from a certain different social category here, but these are women who also are who are involved with men who
Right,
also
right.
feel inadequate, who don't have chances, who are very angry, and so they're in their own way, as Hillary was saying, uh, yeah, they're standing by their
They're
man,
standing by their man who's going to protect, in quotes, them, as Trump
but they
said that he
want,
would be
but that's
protecting.
where they're at.
Well, I guess
They're
it depends how one defines protect.
Well, yeah, but they want a man that can have some sort of traditional role where they can support the family. And right
But
now,
this
everyone is
But this traditional role by this in quotes traditional man did not support his family. He
right,
may have supported his family financially, but that was about it. Where was the
but he couldn't do
support?
that. But
No, he couldn't do
he
that.
couldn't
That's
do
right.
that. But because it's so convoluted because the same policies that would really help and make for a kinder, gentler world have been repudiated. And in those parts of the country where, for example, unions aren't as strong, I mean, that would benefit everybody.
But you're talking,
Yeah,
you're
like
talking
structurally.
politically, you're
Yeah,
talking structurally.
but that has
I'm
impact on
I'm
personality.
talking about personal relationships and how women, could support a man who has, cheated on his wives, who was convicted of sexual assault, who has just been so disgusting in the way he refers to women, talks about women, and yet somehow for 50% of the women in this country, that didn't seem to be an issue.
Well, that's a great statement. And I think what we need to do is not, I'm not condoning saying we should be condoning it, but listen to these women and their explanation of why they're saying this. And I think that you'll find they're very much agreeing with you, but feel very little, uh, there's very little out there as alternatives. But
Well, Kamala Harris was an alternative.
we're talking about the great masses
No, but
of
it is
women.
what we're talking about in this election.
Yeah.
I mean, there she was. Whether you felt that they went far enough in talking about the poor, etc., whether they were too elitist,
They
which
didn't.
they were, you're right. But the fact is that at least, and I do want to check the statistics, at least 50% of American women went along and voted for him. If they voted for him. And what does that say? What does that say
I
about
think
us
we're
as
very
women?
confused, very confused and very polarized and very
We're
uh
very we're very confused.
traumatized.
We're very confused about abusive men.
Yeah.
Well, here we go back to our
Well,
educational system, back to teaching our kids about healthy relationships, back to educating people about how to go about assessing, who's good for you and who's not good for you.
yeah, but we also have a country that's been very abusive uh toward other groups and countries around the world.
Yeah, but on a
And
personal
well,
level,
but
Jim,
that seeps down into the culture, the ethos.
I just wonder because I don't know anybody who I don't know any women, I don't know any men who, voted for Trump, but I would be very interested, as you say, to talk to women who love him. And we, looking at some of the, the reels on television at his rallies, I mean, they couldn't get enough of him. It was a love fest. And what it was about somebody like him, who's such a misogynist, who has been so disrespectful to women on so many different levels, what it is about the women that would support and endorse
What is it
somebody like
about the
that.
nature of power?
It's
That's
sexy. It's sexy to
yeah.
a lot of
And we
people.
look at it in terms of whether he's a great athlete, or a great
Yes,
musician,
exactly.
a great celebrity, a
Yeah,
movie
yeah,
star, and so on.
yeah.
We know it's got the power. So that's something we need to desperately deal with as a country, as a culture, because that leads to this what you're talking about, which is absolutely right on, the domination, the disrespect, not only of women,
The
but of
abuse,
yeah,
the
and the abuse of the
abuse.
environment and the abuse that goes along with a military industrial complex that is trying to control and dominate the world. Not that there aren't uh, people out there we need to also be worried about, but that's where we're at as a world, and that's what I really fear too. Is Trump will not will use that power more to accelerate the abuse on the environment, and cozy up to these
We've get,
despotic factions.
we've given him carte blanche to do just that.
Well, that's what we need.
The problem as I see it, yes, I mean, he's the problem. The
No,
problem
it's not the problem.
as I see it is that the American people voted him in and
And
gave him carte blanche to do
the
what he
problem
wants to
The
do.
problem is you don't have a strong enough anti-war movement. You don't have some of this
Well,
feminist movement that makes sense. I mean, I was reading too now that they're going to have, I don't know what, withholding of sex for it's become like a hate man sort of thing. That's a totally losing proposition by feminists who are so angry at these macho men. They should be angry, but that's not the answer. Again, you were getting to it about 10 minutes ago. We need to have this all embracing love and understanding and listening to people. Listen, listen, listen. You harp on that all the time with your in your show to communicate. Where are people at? What are their issues? Why are they so angry? Why are they so confused? And so on. Why are they taking the abuse that they're taking? That's where you got to start. It's therapeutic, what we're talking about here, and it's a radical love, and that's the route we need to do, even in the face of this despicable, aggressive, authoritarian leader that we now
well,
have.
yeah.
So,
I mean, there's certainly lots to do. And, you know, one of the things that I promised my listeners here on the Progressive Radio Network is that I was going to keep them updated with my efforts to try and see whether my relationship education program could be implemented in more schools here in New York City and around the country. And as I continue to reach out to the heads of schools, to the heads of counseling departments with little or no response.
that's what you need.
And that is
That's
the commentary, Jim, that, you know, people who are supposed to care about educating our young people, I mean, that's where it begins, of course. If it's not in the home, then at least we have an opportunity because we're with the kids, you know, for many hours, you know, during the day when they're at school, to educate them about
well,
healthy relationships. And yet we're failing at that as well.
well,
I mean,
listen,
what do we do with educators who
yeah.
don't want to
You
educate?
find what,
Who
okay,
don't want
as
to
you know, I
educate?
did an event out in East Hampton with Felipe Luciano, and one of the members in the audience was an individual who uh, is working at East Hampton High School, but she's working not with the administration, but she's got a place and she is working with these young kids um, on English, learning English as a second language. And she's got an overwhelming response. You would think that the educators would be doing it, but they're not.
Right,
So she's doing it.
right,
She's got like she's saying like they started with 20 people and now it's close to 300. So there's a need. The same thing with your program.
right.
So if they don't have the guts and courage and backbone to do this, you find other ways.
Well, and this is the thing, you know, Jim, for years, I think that every single week here on the Speedy Show, I've been citing the same statistics,
Yep.
the same mental health statistics, the same depression statistics, the same suicide statistics, the same dating abuse statistics, the same domestic violence statistics, and the same divorce statistics. And yet, you know, and there's so much talk. There's so much talk about mental health and self-help and therapists and love coaches, and yet we continue to miss the boat.
It's
And
big
and
business. The love
It's
coaches,
big business.
uh,
Yes,
and the
yes,
educational
yes,
system doesn't want to rock the boat.
yes.
It's the same thing at the college level as well.
One wonders, whether or not there is somehow either a conscious or an
Mm.
unconscious, feeling of a secondary gain in keeping the crisis going, in keeping the domestic violence rates high. You wonder about that
You have
because,
over 1 million people working in the criminal justice system. That's a lot of jobs. It's a lot of money going into that.
yeah, it
The
is, it
police
is, it is.
unions are very strong
Yeah,
because they're profiting from that. Yeah,
from,
from that crisis, from
yeah.
the drug war, perpetuating that, making us fear, and Trump has been in the forefront of that. We have an opiate crisis. We have this and that that transcends anything we've ever had in history. Such nonsense. But it resonates with people who are trying to survive
Well,
and
I
make a
mean, this
living and get through the day.
this is all very depressing. And
No, I don't.
one of the things,
No,
but one of
listen,
the things,
listen.
one of the things that I really love to do on the show is to motivate and
Yes,
inspire
lift us
people,
out of our depression.
and to take a look at how we're living our life and what we can do on a day-to-day basis to
Absolutely.
live our life better and to live our life in ways that are truly, truly, in our best interest. And there are so many things that we as individuals,
Absolutely.
really are able to do if we're being honest with ourselves, and I was telling, my listeners at the beginning of the show that I had all these crises this morning with patients, and I wasn't sure that I really wanted to do the show. And yet I asked myself the consequences for me not doing a show. It's not good. I wasn't going to feel
Right.
good by just saying, look, let's play last week's show, or let's play a previous show. So we have to be honest with ourselves and trying to figure out what do we need to do
We need to clone you.
every day.
The one,
Well, I'm
no,
not
but
so sure. What do we need to do
yeah,
every single day to stay on track, to stay on a positive course, regardless of how we might
I
feel?
agree.
That's the
But the
challenge.
challenge is, give people half a chance and they will do it. You gotta believe it. It's a view of human nature. People are basically good, and given the chance, they will act in a positive way. Uh, Trump operates under the opposite, that you can't trust people. It's a crisis of power. You got to create fear. Those are the forces we need to overcome. And that goes back to, hey, a saying that we used to have in the 60s, we shall overcome.
Well,
And we
we we
will.
we
We
need we
will.
need
Let's
we
not,
we
let's
need to
not
do
fair.
we need to do a lot more than just talk the rhetoric.
Well,
You
you
know,
need to have slogans too. You need to have songs,
slogans are good,
comedy, and
but it's not what you say. It's really it's
sexuality and
what
so on and
it's
such.
what you it's what you do. And
Yeah.
what I see is that people are really struggling. And
Yeah.
if we put aside, politics, people are really struggling in their personal lives, trying to find a balance. You hear more and more what's happening with jobs. There's been so much job elimination that has
Oh,
occurred and that
absolutely.
is occurring. What to do. I mean, we're in a world right now when you talk to young people, and if they're in universities or colleges, all you really hear is that they're going to go into finance, or they're going to go into tech. And
Very much.
because so many of the other fields, you're not going to be able to pay the rent. You're not going to be able to put food on the table for your kids. So I think that we're in a very challenging time, yet again, right? I mean, this is not the only challenging time that people are having to really deal with. Well, listen, we always appreciate your perspective,
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Always
still
appreciate
feel
yours.
we can disagree, but I think this was a real commentary on Americans, what they value, what they chose, who they chose. I mean, that's the bottom line. That's what happened. And but anyway, again,
Modify a little bit how they were manipulated into voting, So it's a little, but we
Well,
agree more than we disagree.
I think that that's true. So thank you
Good.
so
Thank
much
you.
again.
Love to come on again.
Good, good,
So
good.
see you
To
soon.
definitely to be continued. So everybody, it is 3:57 here in beautiful, beautiful, sunny New York City. And I want to leave you with my two weekly messages that I hope that you really take in. The first, of course, and I think this is something serious, and I say it all the time, but I do hope that it's something that you can give some real thought to, is that you try to live your life every day in ways that are really in your best interest, that you need to ask yourself as you navigate your days, is this good for me? Is that extra drink good for me? Is that extra piece of cake good for me? Or maybe it'd be much better if I took a walk and went to the gym and ate properly and got a little bit more sleep. So we have to be honest with ourselves in questioning whether or not we are taking care of things that are really in our best interest.
Can I have a five
Just
second?
1 sec. And then
Okay.
secondly, when it comes to the world and the outside world, we all really need to do a much, much, much better job in learning to accept each other's differences and find a way to embrace love. And what did you
Yes.
want to say,
I
Tim?
just want to say very briefly, don't let catastrophe have the final word.
I love that.
I love it too.
Don't let catastrophe have the final word.
It won't.
But we need a plan then. We all then need to come up with a plan, whether it's our own personal catastrophe or political catastrophes, and figure out, okay, what do we need to now do to move forward and live our life and our lives in ways that are constructive. So again, thank you so much, everybody, for listening. Have a good rest of the day, and we'll talk with you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.